Have you ever wondered if you are truly in control? Are your choices really your own? Or is something else pulling the strings? Something we might call fate. For centuries, this has been a question for philosophers. They debated endlessly. But today, we have a new tool to explore this ancient mystery, the human brain itself. Welcome to our exploration of free will versus fate. We're going beyond just thinking about it. We are looking at what modern neuroscience actually reveals about our choices. The answers we are finding are complex, surprising, and they might just change how you see everything. So let's dive into the inner universe of the mind. First, let's define our terms simply. Free will is the idea that you, your conscious self, make your own decisions. You are the author of your actions. Fate, on the other hand, is the idea that everything is predetermined. Every choice you make was always going to happen. Your life's path is already set out. For a long time, science seemed to support the idea of fate. Think about it. Everything in the universe, from planets to atoms, follows predictable physical laws. If your brain is just a physical object made of atoms, then shouldn't it follow those same predictable laws? This is the argument for determinism, a modern version of fate. This idea suggests your brain is like a very complex machine, a biological computer. Its output, your decisions, is determined by its inputs and its internal wiring. The inputs are everything you've ever experienced. Your genetics, your upbringing, what you ate for breakfast. All of it feeds into this complex calculation we call a choice. This brings us to a groundbreaking and controversial experiment in neuroscience. It was first conducted by a scientist named Benjamin Libet in the 1980s. It's a game changer. Libet wanted to see what happens in the brain right when we make a simple voluntary choice. He asked people to simply decide when to flick their wrist. He hooked them up to an EEG, a machine that measures brainwave activity. He also had them watch a clock to report the exact moment they decided to move. What he found was astonishing. It shook the very foundation of how we think about free will. The results have been debated by scientists and philosophers ever since. Libet discovered that the brain showed a specific spike in activity before the person was consciously aware of their own decision to move. Let me repeat that. The brain activity, which he called the readiness potential, began about half a second before the person felt they had made the choice. The brain acted first. This implies that your brain starts the process of making a decision before you, your conscious mind, are even aware of it. The choice was already in motion. So, when you felt you were deciding, was it really a decision? Or was it just you becoming aware of a decision your brain had already made for you? This experiment has been repeated and confirmed many times, using more advanced technology like fMRI scanners. The results are consistent and very difficult to ignore. Some scientists can now predict a person's choice, like whether they will press a button with their left or right hand up to 10 seconds before they are aware of it. Think about that for a moment. 10 seconds. That's an eternity in brain time. Your brain seems to know your choice long before you consciously make it. This evidence points heavily towards a deterministic view. It suggests our feeling of free will might be an illusion, a trick our brain plays on us after the fact. It's as if the conscious mind is like a press secretary for the brain. It doesn't make the decision, it just announces it, and then takes all the credit. This can be a very unsettling thought. Does this mean we are just biological puppets? Are we simply watching a movie of our lives, not actually directing it? But wait, the story doesn't end there. The world of neuroscience is not so simple. Other scientists argue this interpretation of the Libet experiment is wrong. They say the readiness potential isn't the brain making a decision. Instead, it might just be the brain's background noise, random fluctuations in neural activity. Imagine your brain is like a bubbling pot of water. The readiness potential is just a bubble rising to the surface. It doesn't mean the water has decided to boil. According to this view, the conscious decision to act happens when one of these random neural fluctuations crosses a certain threshold. The choice is still real. So your brain isn't deciding for you in advance. It's just creating a noisy environment from which your conscious choice can emerge. This preserves a role for free will. Another fascinating idea is that free will isn't about starting an action. Perhaps its true power lies in stopping one. Libet himself suggested this possibility. He called it free won't. Your brain might unconsciously propose an action, but your conscious mind has a brief window of opportunity to veto it, to say no. You might not control the impulse to grab that extra cookie, but you have the conscious power to pull your hand back at the last moment. That's your free will. This power of veto is a crucial aspect of self-control and discipline. It's the part of you that resists temptation and makes more thoughtful, long-term decisions. So, free will might not be the spark that ignites the fire. Instead, it might be the firefighter that stops the blaze from spreading out of control. Let's consider another angle. The brain is not a single unified thing. It's a collection of different systems, all competing and cooperating with each other. You have the ancient emotional parts of your brain, the limbic system. This is where gut feelings and primal urges come from. It's the source of impulsive actions. Then you have the prefrontal cortex, the newer, more evolved part of the brain right behind your forehead. This is the center of logic, planning, and rational thought. The feeling of making a choice is often the result of a battle between these different brain systems. The heart wants one thing, while the head wants another. When you choose the salad over the burger, that's your prefrontal cortex winning a fight against your more primitive, reward-seeking brain regions. A victory for your will. So, free will isn't a single event. It's a complex process of negotiation inside your own head. It's a struggle for control between different parts of yourself. This is why some choices feel easy and others feel incredibly hard. The hard choices are the ones where the internal conflict is the most intense and evenly matched. What about the role of randomness? Quantum mechanics, the science of the very small, tells us that the universe is not entirely predictable. There is inherent randomness. Some have argued that this quantum randomness could bubble up to the level of brain function. It could introduce genuine unpredictability into our neural processes. If our brain activity is truly random at some level, then it cannot be fully predetermined. This could, in theory, open the door for genuine free will. However, most neuroscientists are skeptical of this idea. They argue that the brain is a warm, wet system where quantum effects are likely averaged out and become irrelevant. Randomness is also not the same as control. If your choice is just the result of a random quantum event, is that really you making the choice? A choice caused by a random firing of a neuron doesn't feel like your own decision. It feels more like a muscle twitch or a glitch in the system. So, while quantum mechanics challenges strict determinism, it doesn't automatically give us the kind of purposeful, intentional free will that we feel we have every day. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Does it even matter? If our choices are determined, should we just give up and do whatever we want? This is a common fear. If people stop believing in free will society collapse? Will people stop taking responsibility for their actions and their moral choices? Interestingly, studies have shown that when people's belief in free will is weakened, they are indeed more likely to cheat, be aggressive, and act less helpfully. Believing in free will seems to be a crucial part of our social fabric. It underpins our entire justice system, which is based on personal accountability. But a deterministic view doesn't mean we throw responsibility out the window. It just changes what we mean by it. It shifts the focus from blame to understanding. If a person's brain is wired in a way that leads to harmful behavior, our goal shouldn't be just to punish them. It should be to understand why and how. This perspective encourages a focus on rehabilitation and prevention. How can we change the inputs, the environment, the education, to change the brain's wiring for the better? It leads to a more compassionate view of others. We understand that people are products of their genetics and their life experiences, factors largely outside their control. This doesn't mean dangerous people should be free. It means our reasons for containing them are about protecting society, not about some abstract concept of moral retribution. Let's think about consciousness itself. We still don't really know what it is, or how the brain creates it. This is often called the hard problem. How does 3 pounds of gray, jelly-like tissue create the rich, subjective experience of being you? The feeling of redness, the taste of chocolate, the sound of music. It's possible that our current understanding of the brain is missing a fundamental piece of the puzzle, a piece that is essential to understanding free will. Perhaps consciousness is not just a passive observer. Perhaps it has a real, causal role in directing the brain's activity in ways we cannot yet measure. This is speculative, of course, but it's important to remember the limits of our current scientific knowledge. We are still just scratching the surface of the mind. The brain is the most complex object in the known universe. To think we have it all figured out would be the height of arrogance. There are still mysteries. So, where does this leave us in the debate between free will and fate? The evidence from neuroscience is not a simple knockout punch for either side. It strongly suggests that our intuitive feeling of complete freedom is, at the very least, an oversimplification. Our unconscious brain does a lot of the heavy lifting. Our choices are deeply influenced by our biology, our past experiences, and the constant silent chatter of our neurons. We are not blank slates making decisions in a vacuum. But the evidence does not eliminate free will entirely. It redefines it. It moves it away from being a magical spark and towards being a complex biological process. Free will might be our ability to consciously veto our impulses. It might be the outcome of a struggle between different brain networks. It is our capacity for self-control. It is the ability to think about the future, to weigh consequences, and to override our immediate desires for the sake of a long-term goal. That is a superpower. This form of free will is not all or nothing. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be strengthened or weakened. It varies from person to person. Factors like stress, lack of sleep, or poor nutrition can weaken your prefrontal cortex's ability to exert control. They make it harder to exercise your free will. On the other hand, practices like mindfulness and meditation have been shown to strengthen the connections in the prefrontal cortex. They can literally build up your willpower. So, by understanding the neuroscience, we gain a new kind of power. We can learn how to create the conditions, both internally and externally, for better decision-making. We can learn to be more aware of our unconscious biases and impulses. We can recognize when we are tired or stressed and more likely to make poor choices. This is a more mature, more scientifically grounded form of freedom. It's not about being free from the laws of nature. It's about understanding those laws. It's about understanding the laws of our own nature, the workings of our own minds, so that we can navigate them more effectively. Knowledge gives us a new kind of control. Think of it like sailing a boat. You cannot control the wind or the ocean currents. Those are the determined forces of nature, like your brain's unconscious processes. A sailor who doesn't understand the wind is at its mercy. They are simply blown around. This is like a person who is a slave to their every impulse. But a skilled sailor learns to work with the wind. They use their knowledge of aerodynamics and their control of the sails to steer the boat where they want it to go. They are not defying the laws of physics. They are using them to their advantage. This is what exercising our free will looks like in a deterministic world. We use our conscious awareness, our prefrontal cortex, to set the sails of our mind. We steer ourselves through the currents of our own unconscious thoughts and desires. So the question is not, do we have free will? The better question is, How can we get more of it? How can we become better sailors of our own minds? The first step is self-awareness. Paying attention to your own mental state. Recognizing the impulses that bubble up from your unconscious without immediately acting on them. This creates that crucial pause. The space between stimulus and response. That space, as small as it may be, is where our freedom truly lies. In that moment of pause, we can engage our rational mind. We can ask, does this action align with my long-term goals? Is this who I want to be? This is not easy. It requires effort and practice. Our brains are naturally wired to take the path of least resistance, to follow the immediate gratification. But every time you successfully exercise that self-control, you are strengthening the neural pathways that make it easier to do so the next time. You're building mental muscle. This also changes how we should view failure. When you make a bad choice, it's not a sign that you are fundamentally flawed or doomed by fate. It's a sign that the conditions were not right. Perhaps you were too stressed, too tired, or the temptation was simply too strong for your current level of willpower. The key is to learn from it. What were the triggers? What was my mental state? How can I create a better environment for myself next time? This is a far more empowering and practical approach than simply blaming a mysterious force called fate or relying on a magical notion of free will to save us. It puts the power back in our hands, but not in a naive way. It's a power that comes from understanding, not from ignorance of our own internal workings. So, what has neuroscience revealed about free will versus fate? It has revealed that the question itself is based on a false dichotomy, a flawed premise. It's not a simple choice between being a puppet or a puppet master. The reality is far more interesting and nuanced. We are a complex mix of both. We are shaped by forces beyond our conscious control, our genetics, and our environment. Our brains make calculations and initiate impulses without our permission. That is our fate. But we also have the remarkable capacity for self-awareness and conscious control. We can reflect, we can plan, and we can choose to go against our primal urges. That is our freedom. It's not an absolute freedom, but it is a meaningful one. It's the freedom to try to be a slightly better version of ourselves tomorrow. The debate is not over. As our tools for studying the brain become even more powerful, our understanding will continue to evolve. New discoveries will add more layers. But for now, neuroscience gives us a powerful new framework. It moves us away from ancient philosophical debates and towards a practical science of self-mastery. You are not a passive observer of a predetermined fate, nor are you a completely free agent. You are a sailor on the complex seas of your own mind. Learn to sail.